Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episode on the uh, we do discuss on the green technology, specifically the green energy. We have our expert panelist. We have Professor Joel. He is famous for his work, especially on green energy. We have Professor Donalds, already from World Talent Economy Forums. Many people know about Professor Donalds, Professor Mr. Alex, Mr. James, and we have our new friends. Uh, Kazarwa, and he's from Africa. And already, I think our World Talent Economy Forum's audience, they know about my friend Mr. Mac. Previously, he joined with one of his projects. Today, he has a new project. He want to start 10 minutes of presentations, and then we will start our today's discussions. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. So I want to start with our friend Mr. Mac.
Hi, this is Kbori from Robots Everywhere. I would like to talk to you about CellSol. CellSol is just, it's a bit of a 90s name. It just stands for Cellular Solar. The idea is to deploy very small, very cheap solar-powered pylons to guarantee connectivity in case of a disaster. So for example, here's the device, and you can see it in the background being deployed from a $30 UDI 818 drone. What is this thing? This is a very small device. It's about half the size of a cell phone. It allows cell phones within its radius to send messages. Unfortunately, it can only do text messages, no calls, but after an emergency, being able to communicate at all is extremely valuable. It has a range of about 1 square mile. It weighs less than 20 grams and can be built for less than $20. And it can be deployed by a toy. So this lets any cell phone, we've tested it with cell phones from 2002, send text messages on when there is no other infrastructure. That little antenna there that I just smashed with the drone because I can't drive the drone, gives you about 1 square mile. Now imagine putting these on top of every store or church. They would automatically form a mesh network that would forward messages from the stricken area into an area that has internet connectivity. You can use it to coordinate where to send fire trucks or ambulances. It's completely solar powered. This is me again, not being very good at driving the drone. I figured I would keep I kept this mess up because I wanted to show how tough this thing is. You can literally drop it from an airplane and it will, without a parachute, and it will work afterwards.
Whoops.
They're tiny, they are very cheap. And again, what this does is that it lets you send text messages over, about a square mile. Imagine deploying one of these every square mile and you have connectivity. The thing is that there's no wires, there's no uplink, there's nothing. It's just in and of itself. It will automatically create a mesh network. It will let you send data, very small amount of data, again, text, after an emergency, after a fire, after an earthquake. You can use these to communicate. Oh, this is something else. This is just a liquid representation of a mesh network. It's just a cute video that we made with stuff that we had around. The other thing about CellSol is that it's completely free. We sell kits at cost. We publish the schematics. You can have the and here it is. You can kind of see it. Note that these are 3 AA batteries. It will run for about 6 months on these batteries. And just wait until there's an emergency and then activate fully, in which case it will run for about a week without intervention. The solar panel required to operate it is extremely small. You can run it using something literally 2 square inches in size. We give full instructions on how to build the things. We sell kits. If you don't want to buy it from us, you don't have to. We just give away the schematics and the software. The hope is that, and this is how you make a dipole antenna for it. It's literally a piece of chicken wire. And yes, this will go out for a few kilometers. What's the whole point? The whole point is to have a system that lets you, again, coordinate. You can use this to tell people where you are. You can use this to coordinate with, again, fire trucks or ambulances. No infrastructure required. There is no uplink. If it finds an uplink, it will use it, but it doesn't have to be. The whole point is to say, okay, you know, there's a fire, there's an earthquake, there's any kind of other disaster, there's a riot, anything you want. You can still call for help. You can still offer help with this. That is what the system is for. That is what it's about. Again, each of these things costs about $20 to make. Retail, if you were to make them in bulk, you could use more. This is it will run on pretty much any battery. This is an old cell phone battery. It will run on a again 3AA battery. So it will run on a discarded drone battery. We have schematics. This is the device you use to cut the antenna. You can just 3D print yourself one. And this is the the antenna length. And this is the final device. Just deploy these around your home, around your community, and you know that in case of disaster, you can still talk, you can still communicate, you can still offer help, you can still call for help, you can still get, you know, a fire truck to show up where they have to show up to. This will interface with any phone. If your phone has GPS, most phones do, it will also, at your option, give your coordinates. It will ask you permission, of course, because, you know, we're not in the business of spying. And most importantly, here is where you download everything, right here, f3.tl, that's Cellular. And this is really it. If you have any questions, ask away.
That is amazing.
This is another version of the device which also has Wi-Fi. This is the one that needs a bigger solar panel. This is the one that you use for an uplink. So this thing can communicate with a wider network. This can also be useful for field researchers, for example. You can just kind of extend your infrastructure as you go. Again, these are super cheap to make. They're easy to make. This one can be assembled without any tools, and I'm actually showing off how to do it. This is like this kind of like Lego instructions. The first part is set the software, but the only tool you need is a tape dispenser with a little blade on it. That's it. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So
Shoot.
I was building drones 10 years ago, and I have now purchased my third drone. They're $1,000 each. My first one I donated to the Peshmerga military when I was in Iraq to help fight ISIS. Second one I lost in San Francisco. I have my third one right now. So over the last 2 decades, I've covered disasters around the world. I've now been through 7 hurricanes, and I've covered the aftermath of 5 hurricanes, including Hurricane Katrina. So I've also covered 40 forest fires around the world, 3 major forest fires here in California. So 2 things that comes to mind, maybe you can answer this for me.
Go ahead.
During and after a fire, the FCC blocks all drones from flying in fire areas. You can't, and if you do, you'll get fined and like go to jail and prison. It's like a federal offense to fly a drone after a forest fire. So that's one disaster. A second disaster is now that I've been through 7 hurricanes. After the hurricane goes past, it usually takes a couple days for the wind to even slow down to fly a hurricane. It's like the conditions are really difficult. And everything on every rooftop is destroyed everywhere. So, I mean, and the hurricanes are getting stronger. So I'm wondering how these would be secured in the area. So it wouldn't work for a forest fire unless these were all approved.
Well,
and for a hurricane, so how would that work?
Well, I am only deploying it with a drone in the video to show how light it is. That is a UDI 818 toy. It weighs, the whole thing weighs about 80 grams. What we found is that it works well to secure these things manually, obviously, to trees, because trees can flex. And if that particular tree burns down, these are cheap. You can just put one on the next tree. The other thing we're trying to do is we're trying to put them on power pylons with PG&E. Same reason. Those flags. The thing is that they're not actually getting power from the pylon; they're just using it as a high point. So even if besides, even if the pylon falls off, these things are light enough that they can survive hitting the ground at terminal velocity. So if this, you can drop this thing from an airplane at 2 kilometers up, it will fall, and if it hits the ground instead of hitting concrete, it will work. It will function after hitting the ground. So that is not an issue.
Okay. Okay. Like we have other expert panelists like Professor Joe, Professor Donald,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Churchill, James Eads, and Kazarwa. So if you have any questions, you can you can ask my friends if you have any kind of questions. Mac, are you available?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is James Ead, and I had a question, and I think that my question is basically there are technical difficulties to employing your new device, but we would do it before a disaster would hit, so it would be secure prior to the disaster, and that's okay. So once it's secure, then if the disaster comes and it survives the disaster and still works, then you have your communication. Am I following? Yes. Okay.
Correct. In addition, you can just, these things are a mesh network. So for example, let's say that you have ambulances and fire trucks. You can mount these things on the roofs of those cars and trucks, and wherever those go, they also generate a field around them in which you can talk.
It'd be great for an earthquake. It seems like earthquakes would be very useful after earthquake, but I don't know about
I live in
hurricanes
Marin,
and forest
so
fires.
I live in Marin, so what was in my mind was earthquakes and fires, obviously.
I'm sorry to ask you, but have I fallen in the wrong chat room? Is this about energy independence or is it about communication?
Yes, definitely.
Have I lost the plot? Maybe I should move to another panel about energy. I was invited about energy, not about drones and communications. So alert me if this is the wrong
We're
place.
only 15 minutes into this conversation. We just started. It's a 2-hour talk. We're 15 minutes in.
Yes.
Okay. So let's get back to energy.
The point of this device, that's the thing. The point of this device is that it's solar powered with a really tiny panels. It's self-contained.
Right.
Exactly.
Most people cannot produce an IKEA table, that comes on panel, and you think they're going to produce this. Well, good luck with that. Meanwhile, let's get on to the energy subject, lest we forget that it's early morning here where I am, and good morning to you, and happy Hanukkah, this being, the second day of our Jewish holiday. It's a high holiday, and let's get back in the spirit of belongingness, sharing, and kindness and love. I think, for my humble opinion, we perhaps have too much communication devices as opposed to having not enough. With about 6 billion cell phones in the world, and admittedly, a lot of us have more than one, But
after a disaster, they're not going to work. That's a problem.
Okay. Let's go back to energy now. We are done with the disaster. Let's be positive and see how we can solve the energy business.
Yes.
Because disasters are overwhelming, and I haven't seen any disaster except the panic that we have from too much communication, everybody going crazy, watching too much TV, getting all those alerts on our cell phones. We are all going to die from COVID and the next thing that's coming, SARS-2 or whatever. People are going depressed and they're jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge and the Aurora Bridge in Seattle. For God's sake, let's pipe down, Enough with the disasters.
Okay.
Let's talk about Hanukkah. Hanukkah is a great holiday. Does anybody here purport to the Jewish faith?
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Churchill. Thank you, Dr. Churchill. Professor Joe.
My question is there anybody part of the Jewish faith who celebrates
You just
Hanukkah?
said let's talk about energy, and now you're talking about a Jewish holiday.
Yeah,
I thought we're talking about energy now.
It's sharing the wishes, because Hanukkah has something to do with energy. It has to do with the little candles. The candles, okay? Some people, they find it a tradition to utilize candles. So candles is a form of energy for light. So go ahead.
Thank you. Dr. Churchill, we have our expert, Professor Donald and Professor Joe. We want to start with Professor Joe. Professor Joe, as you are expert in energy, you can give some feedback to our friends. Maybe your opinions and Professor Donald's opinions will be helpful for him. And we can start the discussions on energy-related things. Professor Joe.
Well, let's see. If we're going to be talking about quote-unquote green energy,
yes,
that for me connotes renewable energy.
Yes.
What I call clean, limitless, homegrown, democratically distributed. And it sort of comes in the categories of what I call the big five, kind of like the big five animals in Africa that tourists and the safari people go to see. But the big five sources of renewable energy, of course, are the big one, the really big one, solar, which is the basis of almost all of the others, including wind, and then water power, a couple or three different kinds of water power, by the way. I'll come back to that in just a second. And then biomass, green plants, and then finally geothermal, which is the only one that's not really solar. It's earth power. The water power, of course, there's falling water from the sky, which was raised into the sky by the heat of the sun. And, you get waterfalls and rivers and so on. But you also have the oceans, the difference in temperature between the surface of the ocean and the cold depths. And that temperature difference can be harvested via what's generally called OTEC, OTEC, ocean thermal energy conversion, to generate enormous amounts of energy, at least theoretically. Of course, the devil's always in the details. There have been various experiments and pilot projects, but nothing, of significant production yet. And there are arguments that maybe that's a route we don't even want to pursue for various scientific reasons having to do with temperature balances and so on. And let's see, another form of water power, would be wave power and tidal power. Again, wave power, the waves are caused by the wind, and the wind is caused by the sun, basically. Tidal power, again, you could say, well, that's not solar power, that's lunar power. but I call them all sky power, and I guess even geothermal, because, hey, where does geothermal energy come from? It comes from two things in the heart of the Earth. One is radioactivity, and the other is the squeezing pressure from the weight of the Earth itself, causing the interior of the Earth to be very hot, which is, what gives rise to geysers and volcanoes and so on. And hey, where did the Earth come from? The Earth came from the sky. The Earth was constructed by an infall of, trillions and trillions of pieces of rock back at the birth of the solar system 4.5 billion years ago. So even the Earth is from the sky. And of course, we and all of the atoms in us ultimately are from the sky. So yeah, sky power to the people. So that's a very general, maybe somewhat colorful, maybe kind of useless introduction to what I call the big five of renewable energy. But anyway, that'll get us kicked off a little bit more directly on the energy theme, hopefully.
Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Donalds, what do you want to share with us about the green technology? Even though today I do discuss with a few countries, they're seriously, even in the COVID situation, they're seriously concerned about green technology, especially in the energy sectors. Even they have heavily dependency on HFO. They have dependency on coal power plants, but now government thinking as well as policymaker thinking that they need to move in the green technology, green energy sectors. So what's your opinion? How we can improve this area?
I want to add one thing to what Joe said. There's hydrogen fuel cells are starting to come around, and that's another way of using water in a sense, because water is hydrogen and oxygen, and if you can split off the hydrogen, then you've got hydrogen for hydrogen fuel cells, which when you burn the hydrogen, it combines with oxygen and turns back into water, and so it's not polluting at all.
Actually, in a fuel cell, you don't even burn the hydrogen. There's no combustion. It's a direct electrochemical process, which is really cool. Thanks for bringing that up, Donald. That was actually on my list for a little bit later on. It's sort of more in the category of storage, which is a huge key to being able to practically harness renewable energy on a massive scale.
That's great. I mean, I'm probably jumping ahead of something that Joe is going to talk about anyway, but storage can be different ways. One of them is hydrogen fuel, one of them is lithium-based batteries. But interestingly, you can do storage by things like during the day, pumping water up a hill into a reservoir, and then at night having that water come out and run turbines, so that you can store the energy by using solar energy to create a mechanical battery of sorts. And I'm sure Joe will tell us other exciting ways about that. I want to mention something that I've mentioned before, is that the evolution of the electric power industry in the United States was basically controlled by the gas companies. So Rockefeller, people like that. And originally the idea was to have smaller stations and distributed distribution. That was the way it started. But then the gas companies realized that if that happened, they wouldn't be able to control electricity as a resource and sell it. So they used the existing right-of-ways that they had for gas, and they put power lines in them, and then they centralized the power system so that we wound up with a system that has requires a lot of copper and poles and all these kinds of things. But we've talked about that before. Developing countries don't have to do that. If they don't already have a system like that, then they could start from square one by using distributed power, solar, of course, being the easiest one. And I think that we've got to help them in every way possible, encourage them, have wonderful devices like we just heard about, help decentralize the phone systems and other things. So I know that it's happening, and India and China are both doing that. They're trying to get localized power you can have all the power you need on your roof with a battery. It's kind of expensive right now, though. And that's basically what I'm saying, is that in a way the corporations are fighting us, because if they wind up not being able to control the distribution of the power, they don't make as much money. And I looked it up last night, and the petroleum industry is the third biggest global industry. It's quite large. It's been pushed out by some financial services are actually bigger now than petroleum, which is also dangerous because they don't really provide anything. They just make money using money, and that's kind of dangerous. But ExxonMobil got delisted from the stock market. It's shrinking so fast right now because of the conversion to solar and renewable types of sources that it actually got kicked off the stock market. And one of the biggest companies in the United States, it practically destroyed the United States with one of the recessions that it caused by screwing up. So I think that if you're a developing country, you certainly don't want to base your energy sources on petroleum, because it's on the way out. It's getting so expensive relative to renewable that it's just like coal. Coal is never going to come back because it's a very expensive and unwieldy source of power. Coal power plants have to run continuously. They can't just start up and stop. So as bad as natural gas is, it's a lot better than coal, because when you can shut the plant off, and then when there's demand, you can turn it back on, but you can't do that with coal. And so coal is on the way out, and we're going to see other petroleum sources on their way out. So you've got to go straight to electric. And I hope that we're starting to see that around the world.
It's a great
Thank
book.
you.
The title by Tom Hartman, brilliant commentator. The book title is The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. That refers to oil and coal. Those were formed by biomass millions of years ago, deep underground, under the ocean basins and so on. And so sunlight that's sequestered in these amazingly, marvelously efficient fossil fuels, but also marvelously dirty. And so that solar energy is now, millions of years later, finally being unlocked and released into the atmosphere. But we're down to the last hours of that ancient sunlight in the dwindling oil and coal reserves, or at least dwindling in their usefulness. So, a kind of a whimsical notion there, but a nice theme for thinking about it.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Churchill, I want to ask you a question specifically a role of good policy for implementing these green technologies, especially in energy sector.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, as I said earlier, glad to be here and meet all of you to talk about energy, that being an amazingly vital subject of our life. We do tend to consume a lot of it in various degrees. Now, I want to remind you that advanced countries, or what we would call economically developed countries, they consume about 110 times more than the second tier of countries. And that probably equates to a vast difference in economics, as well as the reason why we have a lot of conflicts. The insatiable appetite of the first world towards the third world, where it so happens that a lot of these resources remain untapped. And I do mean, the places such as Africa and, especially the Middle East. And of course, the Arctic, or under the floor of the seabed of the Arctic, and other places into which, there is not what we equate with economic development. They have to give up the juice, so to speak, in order to fire up the economies of the first world. And that is the most terrible inequity that exists, between the haves and the have-nots. So consistently, the last 100 and maybe 150 years, we have been causing conflict in order to reach and satiate our appetite for energy sources, namely oil, and the transition to oil. As you know, it happened for the participation in the industrial age, and the internal combustion engines, they were the ones who drove this tremendous need for having oil in our lives as the motivating factor of our energy. Now, remember, when the navies switched over from coal to oil, that was the pivotal moment into which actually the big oil companies became the great 5 or 7 oil companies of the world. They became some of the biggest economic engines. Now, I would not expect that this was just a matter of policy. It was not. It was an evolutionary step in the way of the facility of the human beings to grow their brains, to grow their bodies, and to grow their countries into more complex societies. Complex societies, the more complex they are, the more energy they require. And if you look at the procession of the growth of energy, you will find out that instead of us limiting our energy needs, we are increasing them almost in an exponential function. Again, please pay attention here. You use your mathematical hat on. Just put your calculator, fire him up, and make a calculation and see that the difference that exists between the undeveloped world and the developed world, and I'm talking about 110 to about 1,000 times more energy usage, is reflected in the fact that the developing world is trying to catch up and get to the same level of the developed world in terms of energy usage instead of the other way around. So what that says is that as we are increasing our energy requirement on the first world, the remainder of the world is also trying to catch up and have the same energy requirements that we have. And this exponential growth of energy, even with 7.5 billion people on Earth, it will necessitate that we keep on developing new sources of energy, and we maintain the whole mixture of energy in whatever is available now, plus the new step. So I cannot say what the new step would be, but if you look at the exponential growth of need of energy, if we were to go solar to meet the demands, not just of today, but the demands of tomorrow, and I don't know when tomorrow, would be in your lifetime, for us could be, just like, 10 years from now, or even less, you shall find out that there would not be enough land on Earth to be covered with solar panels in order to produce enough juice to power the lives of everybody here. So there are some physical policy limitations we have to be aware every time we say, oh, we are all going to go solar, or we are all going to go hydrogen, or we are all going to go, this or that or the other. No, it's not a matter of policy. The matter of policy is to encourage the stipulation that we will try to use the cleanest possible technology, and we will do it in such a way that we will avert the negatives of the climate change while at the same time giving enough energy to our people. I sure hope that we will grow up to be mature enough to understand that we not need to be having any more wars like the Iraq war or the Afghani war or any one of the other wars in order to take the oil, from those impoverished countries who don't know how to manage the resource very well, or they are quite inept at administering a complex society. And we will find new ways, such as hydrogen perhaps, or such as many other means, to develop our own resources internally without having to build pipelines to transport, this oil through very hostile, difficult environments like Afghanistan, or maybe, the southeast, the pipeline from Russia, and going through the war zone now in Nagorno-Karabakh between Armenia and Azerbaijan and all these places. And everywhere you see that there is a chance to build a pipeline or to develop new oil fields, you will notice that there are battles going on. There is war, there is instability. So yes, oil has been, in some ways the bane of our existence in terms of, trashing the peace. But at the same time, the policy of development has been the one that necessitates access to plentiful and inexpensive oil, because every one of you that I see, you nice people over there, you are probably, utilizing the benefit of oil. I know of a small country that I visited and I spent a bit of time there. The name of the country is Finland. And if you look at the energy mix of Finland, is about 39% coal and wood. Burning wood and coal, it amounts to about 40% of the energy consumption. Another 25% is oil. And they also have nuclear at about 18%. And they have a tiny bit of hydropower. And they also even burn the peat. So wind and solar, they are nothing in Finland. And yet Finland has an advanced economy, of course, very small country, but they burn everything they can lay their hands on. So when you look at examples like that, and then you come back and you look at the Pacific Northwest of the United States, which is kind of near in the same parallel on this earth, same latitude 47 or so, you find out that we are far more advanced than Finland in the way that we do under energy, because in the Northwest, where I live in Western states, we use about 60% of our energy from hydro, because we happen to have rivers and we build dams, and we use that. And also that's the main source of energy, but we augment that with some wind. We don't have so much solar, in the northern latitudes to make a big difference, but we do have the possibility of developing all kinds of hydropower. In addition, we also make wonderful new wind turbines that in certain areas that they happen to have wind channels, they produce sufficient energy to justify the immense cost. So I challenge you and I say, who is the best for the future to make policy? It is not the UN to make energy policy. It is not even the United States or any other of the countries. The energy policy that the people make is like voting by their feet. When they want to go independent, and I myself, a maverick that I am refixing my old home in Seattle, my college home where I've come back to, and I'm a Husky, by the way. That was my first alma mater, University of Washington. And I'm trying to go completely off the grid in Seattle without too much solar, without too much sun. I'm putting about 6 panels on the top of the roof, and I believe those with about 3 batteries, solar batteries, they would be able to provide some very basic electricity, so I can be off the grid simply for reasons of experimentation to see if it's possible to be done in such a completely unique way in Seattle, in the Pacific Northwest. Then I think tens of thousands, if not more, people can do it, because at this point in life, the cost of going off the grid has become fairly inexpensive. And I repeat this, it's a cost factor that dictates the policy. If a person like me, in a reasonable, inexpensive way, can procure some big batteries and have a few big solar panels, not many, 6 or so, I would be able to say that I can be off the grid, and so can you, because most of you live in places that you have a lot more sun. And so there is a revolution happening, but it's not because of policy. At this stage, I can tell you that nobody is giving even tax credits in the Pacific Northwest for solar panels, because they consider it quite an inefficient mechanism. And everybody wants to rely on centralized power. And this is the key here. Centralized power is the one that de facto makes the policy to be faulty. If we want good policy, we have to decentralize the power grid, and that means all of us to start producing a little bit of power and sharing it within our local communities. And I think that's when you will find out the tipping of the policy. Because if communities become reliant on themselves in producing their own energy, then you will find out that the rest of us, we will not have to rely on the big power generators, like, the big coal factories that are utilized, in various countries like Finland and even Sweden and even Germany, who claims to be very advanced and independent in capacity of sustainable energy. That is how we change the policy. And then I heard somebody saying that the age of coal is over. Well, I happen to disagree. Coal is this wonderful, concentrated energy source that has contained biomass and sunlight over 230 million years. However, the method of extracting the energy from coal is not through burning. When you burn a chunk of coal, the only thing you're getting less than 1% of its own energy output to reach your home in order to boil your tea kettle to make a cup of tea. If we were to extract the energy from a chunk of coal in a chemical fashion, like we do from hydrogen, without burning it, without having any fumes or any CO2 extracted, we could possibly power a spaceship to go to Mars with so much energy that's contained within each coal. So how we extract the energy from the
Hold
various,
on a sec.
it makes a huge difference.
Yes.
So
Okay.
that is my
Okay.
point. And I wanted to
Yes.
say that the policy that we make, it follows the energy needs and the energy consumption patterns of our people. So if we change
Okay.
ourselves and we become self-sufficient, the policy will change, not the other way around.
I don't know, like example, I have like more than 10 years of experience, even though I know all of you are very experienced to closely working with the governments, how actually policy develop in the developing nations. I have a close understanding on that particular points. It's difficult for me to understand that much people has ability to contribute in the policy. It's difficult for developing nations. I want to learn more about the US context and about the developed nation context. But for my understanding, it's quite difficult because of the much people, they do not have enough awareness, enough understanding about this kind of projects. And most of the cases, there are not of a lot of issues politicians and the government, they have to handle. And yes, we want better policy for sustainable economy. I want to directly go to Mr. Alex. How do you want to introduce this green economy as well as the green energy policy, and what your experience? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So before I go into that topic, I sent you a Facebook message of an image. Are you able to go into that and then save that into your computer and bring that up when I'm ready? The image that I sent you through Facebook Messenger? Okay, so I'll go back to that in a few moments. Okay, thank you. So I wanted to, I loved what Dr. Churchill brought to this conversation. War is a huge concern when it comes to extracting fossil fuels. We've seen a lot of wars associated with the extraction of fossil fuels. So thankfully, as we transition towards renewable energies, I feel that we're going to see a lot less of that. It's also going to provide energy independence for those countries. So not only are they less dependent on fossil fuels, it gives them energy independence. I think it also helps them recover from disasters easier, depending on what the disaster is, when they're able to create the energy in their individual country. And I know that after I went to the Philippines, I think it was 2013, 2014, after Superstorm Haiyan, local name was Yolanda, they were considering transitioning towards renewable energies and having solar. So if there ever was another major superstorm, they would still have that energy. So I did want to mention Dr. Churchill to support that. So from some of the statistics that I looked at, we are going to see a huge increase in electrical need and or electrical usage around the world. Because a lot of our cars are going to be electric, so we're going to continue. Well, and just we love technology and more technology is being produced. So we're going to have to continue to keep up with those needs, and we don't want to be using dirty energies. So the battery storage, there's a couple different ways to look at battery storage. And I know that Donald mentioned there's dams, there's batteries, and then they're also using that technology with bricks. That's another type of energy storage, where they actually use the crane to lift the bricks up and they stack them in a certain area that's high. So then they use the potential energy of gravity to get that energy back a little bit later. I think that the storage of using dams is okay to a certain extent, but we don't always want to be dependent on the hydrological cycle for our energy needs or our battery storage needs. As we continue to see climate change, we're going to continue to see disruptions in, the climate and, weather patterns and, ocean currents and wind currents and everything. So we can't be dependent all the time on dams for energy and the storage, because we've seen in different situations, there's this one place that they actually drained all of the water reservoir just to get enough energy to power the city, and all of these fish died. It was like hundreds of thousands. So it's just not always reliable. So as we're continuing to talk about energy, I recently read a report just how expensive it is to build a nuclear power plant versus just directing that same amount of money, the finances, the resources, and attention into creating solar fields. So they're easier to build, to manufacture, to put together for the amount of electrical outlet. And then there's this other report that I read where I don't remember where it was, but there's a whole nuclear power plant that they're working on decommissioning, and they're like billions of dollars short. Like it's like 10 billion or 40 billion. It's a lot on decommissioning it. So it's so much money to deal with nuclear. I'm pretty sure Joe's been anti-nuclear in some of the discussions and some of the classes that I've taken from him.
Can I add something as an electrical engineer? So I'm an electrical engineer by profession, and what I have to say is that one of the things about two things about solar very quickly is, one, there's no moving parts, so the maintenance is a lot than just about anything else, including hydro, and I like hydro. Two, solar. The thing about solar is that you can start small and keep expanding it. If you're building a coal plant or a nuclear plant or a dam, you have to put up a giant initial investment, so only a big company or a government can do that. If you want to put up panels, you can do that on your farm and just add panel by panel, which you cannot do with other systems. You can do that with wind a little bit, but micro wind is not as efficient as big wind, whereas a solar panel is a solar panel.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you for pointing that out. And then when it comes to, so I spoke at a UN climate change conference at the UN headquarters in Vienna, Austria. I was one of the main speakers, and then we broke into groups. And so out of the 80 or 90 people that were there, we had this consensus out of all of us that were educated in renewable energy that dam energy, it was just not sustainable. So I wanted to go back into, so Dr. Churchill was also mentioning putting solar on his house, but there's also small wind turbines that you can get, because I know Seattle rains a lot and it might be cloudy, and you're not, with the amount of sun hours in the day, depending if there's trees, depending on if it's overcast or if it's rainy, if you incorporated a wind turbine with your other solar panels, it might make your overall energy input more efficient. And then there's a lot of solar panel systems that contribute electrical energy back to the grid, and you don't necessarily need batteries for those systems. So I think it's better for the environment if we don't have to use
I would
batteries.
like to ask you to assist me in this process, because obviously, although I know the policy and I'm doing this as an individual in my own home, I don't have
really
the specific knowledge of how to do the inverter connection to the panel. But the goal, because I want to donate my house to the environmental parliament after I'm gone to the dirt, and after I'm gone, as I had done before, except I survived. So I want to make it completely off the grid, and there is very many reasons. The number one reason is because I believe that by going off the grid completely, we would be able to make the revolution necessary. If each one of us goes off the grid in a significant way to be self-reliant, that's how you break down the monopoly of the large power plants, including what you said, the nuclear, which they become part of the mix. That's how we can mothball all the coal factories. That's how we can mothball the large hydroelectric dams that they actually contribute to the destruction of the salmon in the Pacific Northwest. I know my friends, the Indians, they've been trying to get the Snake River Dam being demolished and perhaps become more friendly, so they can allow the fish to climb up again, on the headwaters of the Snake River in southwest Washington state and start producing salmon again. And the only reason why we have a hope for that to happen is because this was Indian territory, and it is the Indian tribes who have been trying to destroy the Snake River Dam in order to allow the salmon to come back again. And because they have those ancient rights that they were deeded to them with the treaties, we might have a chance for success. I'm not sure it will, but the revolution that I see is to create a personal revolution of energy.
Unfortunately, they're already ahead of you.
Yes.
There's a lot of counties around the United States where they've made it illegal to live off grid. I think Florida is one of those areas. So as much as all of us want to have energy independence for the homesteading reason, self-sufficiency, energy independence, as long, and it's an important step towards us all transitioning towards renewable energies and sustainability. The big energy companies or whatever have put a lot of stops because of politics. So we have to fight
them. And the way
you also need permits to do all this in California.
I will stand against that. And if I go to jail for gaining my energy independence, maybe you'll come and bail me out and say the guy was doing the right thing.
But we'll all put a GoFundMe together.
I just put up my solar panels, and I had to go through all of that. All the legal requirements and what PG&E would allow me to do.
Exactly.
Because you wanted to be in touch with them. I don't want to be in touch with them. I cut off the wire already, and I will
red tape and permits and all of that.
I'm not going to
I went through it all.
Because you can go back to the Homesteading Act and have that capacity to do it. And you might have to show up in court a few times. But that's how we change the laws.
So I took a course in solar technology. You should take the course too. So I wouldn't put it on my house, but I did put it on my tiny home.
I make you as a friend, so you have the course, you have the knowledge, you share with me. God bless you. I don't need to take the course, I'm just doing it.
We go to jail together.
Thank you.
Going out. Guerrilla solar systems.
I issue my invitation for you to come to Seattle and stay with me and do this thing right away. Please.
I'm going to go to jail and ask Dr. Churchill, why are you in jail? And he's going to ask me, why are you not?
I put solar on my house.
That's right.
Yeah, why are you not?
No, I do not want to. I want to continue my session. So I
Yes,
do
of
not
course.
want to send anyone in the jail in the
No, no,
future.
no,
We
no.
have to do a lot of work.
But,
Yeah.
but like
Okay.
Martin Luther
So,
King
yes.
says, he
Yes.
wrote a letter from the Alabama jail because he went to jail for what he believed to be right.
Yes.
And
But
he
but
said,
for but
we
for
have to
me
stand up
continuing
against.
for me continuing this session is very important.
Of
So I
course.
want
And
everyone
Karim,
outside.
I want to
Yes.
support you, but you see, there is a consensus emerging that by us becoming energy independent individually, it's going to be like the personal computer revolution. We used to have the big machines everybody relied on. Now everybody has their own computer. I tell you, the future is that we are all going to have our own energy generation in our home, and we would not have to be attached, via cables to any large
Yes.
utility company
Yes.
that they make the
Yes.
policy. That is the revolution,
Thank
and
you.
that is the policy
Thank you.
proposal
Thank
for
you.
energy and
Thank you.
renewable independence. Thank you.
We have our new friends. Can you please introduce yourself? And I want to know more about Africa and what the situation right now in Africa and the green energy. Yes,
Kazara.
my friend
Yeah,
Kazuma.
my name is
Yes,
Kazara Says. I'm an environment activist from Uganda. Yes. Kazara Says, an environment activist from Uganda.
Hello,
I'm a
Kazara.
student. I'm glad to be here. I'm currently staying in the capital city of Kampala. Yeah, talking about green energy that you've been talking about, we have our governments which not support most of the programs, and as you know, we live in a different place areas. So, yes, hello. I'm glad to be here.
yes.
And
Thank you.
we have tried to struggle a lot in seeing the world to become green, or our country to become green. Some of us we've been able to start up some projects of solar panel to see that we can at least improve the standards of the people and the world at large, because we have a lot of taxes on those solar panels. Uh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
Yes,
yeah.
yes,
You can
yes.
hear you.
If you turn down the volume on your phone, it won't
Yes,
echo
hello.
like that for you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can hear you fine.
Yes, yes, yes.
Keep speaking.
Yes, now you can hear me.
Yes.
No problem.
Yes,
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes,
yes.
yeah. I've been talking about yes, I've been talking about our governments not being so supportive, because we have tried to struggle a lot in trying to create green energy. Like some of us, we've started some organizations. Like me, I started an organization called Create a Smile for Kids Uganda, and mostly I'm targeting about to seeing the clean environment, trying to empower young children like me and young people, how they can be able to protect their environment. And because I saw that in the future, if we don't fight for our environment, our countries, we might end up in a danger and in a disaster. And we also have some governments which don't care, who are in like giving out to the swamps to investors, and you find they are distracting everything. We have a lot of challenges, most of them which are political, and others which are on our standards of living. You find some families cannot afford the solar energy you're talking about, and which is also challenging. So I started off an organization called Create a Smile for Kids Uganda, and I came up with some lights, solar affordable light bulbs, which can support families that cannot be able to afford the solar power or afford the electricity. Because as we are targeting on green energy, I saw that this would be very fantastic and good. And these are some of things I've been doing. I've been able to give out like 4 families solar power system to help them in this pandemic, and also create a most awareness about how it's good to use those solar power and systems that can help in protecting our environment. And I saw that if we can give out to solar energy to some of families and the places in our country, we can be able to create the good environment for everyone, and we can be able to protect our environment. So I've been making these out, like our fundraisers. I've been able to put out to GoFundMe page to support me in helping those families to get solar power. It's a lot of challenging because it's very hard to start up something that where you find your governments are not so supportive. But for me, I decided as a young environment activist to set up that thing so as families can be able to get solar power. That's one of the things I've been able to do out. And those, yes.
Okay, thank you, thank you. I want to go to my friend Mr. Jem Eads. What your comments on the green technology, and what will be the future?
Well, let me just wrap up the entire conversation in a couple of words. I'm just joking, because we've hit a lot of subjects, and we've been talking about a lot of different things. And my contribution to this is somewhat limited because the EAT Foundation is dedicated to education and not energy. But because my last name starts with an E, I can talk about anything that starts with an E. So education, my problems have been connectivity and the distribution of education. And yes, if they could all do it themselves, they wouldn't need me, but they can't. So I don't know where they are. They don't know who I am, and how do I connect to them? That's the main thing that's been my problem. But as far as energy is concerned, I will go back to Professor Joe, and I would agree that we are all stardust. And it doesn't just apply to us, but it applies to the fossil fuels, and it applies to the sun. We're all stardust. And so we can't take any of these energy sources for granted. But we can't say fossil fuel, bad fossil fuel. Fossil fuel is neither bad nor good. Fossil fuel simply is. It's how we use or misuse it that is the problem. So we have to use it in a more intentional way. We talked about how we can never have enough energy for everyone. Well, there's also the idea of conservation. We can conserve. We don't need as much energy as we consume. So we have to raise our awareness about how we can consume less. And all of us consume less so all of us can have enough. And that's the goal that we're all trying to struggle for. And this is an idea that we find is people say, okay, for profit. Well, if we didn't have for-profit motive, we would never accomplish any of these objectives. So it's business first, profit. And we have others saying, no, we need government policy. The government policy is what we need. And so it becomes an either or, industry or government. And what we need is both industry and government. We need governmental policies, governmental initiatives, and to make it interesting enough of an incentive for the businesses to do it. So there has to be a policy that is business friendly, but also businesses that do not destroy the environment while they go about their business. So these are a combination of things, government and industry, not government or industry. So these are the things that I wanted to make clear. And there's also the idea that we have someone in Uganda telling us my government is against this. So we have not only governments fighting each other, battles over these precious resources that we all should share, but we have these problems that they are, in our country, we are in the United States, we are supporting businesses that destroy the environment. We are subsidizing them. So these governments have to step up and think of themselves, if it's America first, it's America alone. So you have to be global in your perspective in solving these problems. These problems are not unsolvable. You can solve them, but you have to have them working together as one, rather than me working over here versus you over there. And we do not yet have the capacity of working as one. So we must focus on that we're all in this together. And if I survive and you don't, it's a loss. And if we all survive, it's a win. So we have to focus on that, get governments behind that idea, get industry behind that idea, and we'll start to solve these problems. For me, it still goes back to distribution and connectivity. These are the things. If we can just distribute the energy in a sane way. And it definitely from the ground up, and definitely some of it from resources rich to resources poor. These are all things there's no one answer. There's no one approach. We have to have a myriad of approaches and a myriad of people working to make them successful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Professor Joe and Professor Donald, because you are coming up with different kind of statistics, data and information. Already we shared about the different kind of energy sources. My question is that which renewable sources is the best, as well as what your observation that renewable energy can replace fossil fuel? Professor Joe, I want to start with Professor Joe, then Mr. Donald, then Alex, then Dr. Churchill.
Well, if you had to ask that question, which renewable energy source is the best, things generally aren't that simple, but it comes pretty close. Solar, and in particular, solar electric. If I had to give an answer, that would be it. And of course, it's not universally available, up in Seattle there, or Alaska, or Finland, or whatever. And of course, there are schemes to put huge solar arrays in North Africa in the desert, and then wire the power with HVDC, high voltage direct current, to Northern Europe. I don't know. I think that'll probably never happen, or probably shouldn't happen.
That's another form of colonialism. We shouldn't let it happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you could do things like with storage systems like hydrogen, which can be transported. Of course, it takes energy to transport them, but you can weave together a network of, loosely. My ultimate vision is a loosely connected network of microgrids. Microgrids, each of which are sort of, self-reliant, and they cooperate, and the details still are being worked out, and we're barely started on that. But a book that I want to recommend by the same guy who I just put into the chat here, the link to Solar Dividends, about funding a universal basic income with solar, which is a radical and fantastic idea whose time has long since come. Highly recommend. The same guy who wrote this, he lives here in Santa Cruz. He's a friend of mine. Bob Staten also wrote a book which is great for community college instructors like myself teaching basic renewable energy courses. The book is called Power Shift from fossil energy to dynamic solar power, or to dynamic power, I guess, renewable power, something like that, but Power Shift. And in there, he makes the argument, goes through in several chapters and leads up to the argument that, look, solar is the best of all, the most universally applicable and promising. But he's not saying don't do the other things. I have another friend here who's one of the world's experts on hydro, small hydro, micro hydro. And I used to be all excited about that, and it still has lots of potential out there. Heck, there are tens of thousands of little dams in the U.S. that were built for flood control, and they could be retrofitted for small hydro. But this expert friend of mine, Don Harris, he used to have a company, Harris Hydroelectric. He actually is kind of lukewarm on hydro now, even small hydro, because you really got to watch out about the fish and so on. And he can bend your ear very intelligently and wisely for a long, long time. But there is still a place for that, I'm sure. And wind, small wind and large wind. I heard Alex mention earlier about putting little wind turbines on houses and buildings. The problem with that is you get turbulent flow on the edges of buildings, and those wind turbines just are not very efficient, and they also cause a lot of vibration and noise, and there are problems. It's just I have not yet seen a small system building deployment that really works, and I'm in touch with some real experts on all that. But anyway, let me just say one fact that I was going to say thinking about this green energy.
at the Talent Economic
There's
Forum.
chatter in the background there. Oh well. Everybody else here. What I'm saying, 1 hour of sunlight energy hitting the world, hitting planet Earth is enough to power all of civilization for a year. How many hours in a year? Well, almost 10,000. 8,760, something like that. But we have of order 10,000 times, 10 to the fourth times the amount of energy coming in from the sun that we need. Now, of course, okay, well, 3/4 of the Earth's surface is oceans. And I think Dr. Churchill earlier mentioned something about insufficient land area. But that really needs to be looked at. The ultimate promise for massive deployment of solar, I think, is on land that's already shot to hell, you know, military bases on the edges of runways and highways and, you know, parking lots and super malls and all this kind of stuff. That's land that's already spoken for, but can be now, you have a stacked function to also harness it for solar. So anyway, but if you do the math and with storage, which is still coming, then there is great promise there. I mean, you know, I'm a NASA guy. I worked at NASA Ames Research Center for years. I was part of a team that helped solve the ozone problem. You know, we saved the ozone layer. But anyway, you would think I'd be in favor of space deployment of solar. And sometimes I kind of wonder. I mean, I always poo-pooed that. Who wants a whole bunch of rocket launches, sending things into space and then microwaving power down to the Earth's surface? It could probably work, and it may well be that in the far future, sort of the sci-fi future for the Earth, that is the way we ultimately go, is space deployment of solar. You do not have the problem of clouds or even night and so on. But I think there's enough to work with on the Earth's surface. We just got to get creative and generous and fair, and all those issues are what's really important. Okay.
And most importantly, what I wanted to mention is that if we can increase the conversion rate of the existing solar today from about 15%, which is average, to somewhere around 50%, then we can solve this problem easily. And I think that's the biggest scientific challenge, how we can make the solar cells produce similar to what the plant life is producing. The simple plants that you have, the grass and any green and the trees, they completely convert the solar energy via this amazing process, but we have not been able to do enough biomimicry to manage our solar cells to produce enough electricity out of the sunlight. That is the big litmus test for our scientists.
Well, actually, an interesting fact about photosynthesis is that in terms of efficiency of the energy conversion from the sun to the energy that the plants need, it's only 1% efficient, 1 or 2 at best percent. But the point is, it's deployed all over the world.
Exactly.
And it works very gently.
It works with us because it also produces oxygen that we absolutely need to maintain the balance, and it takes away CO2 and sequesters carbon into the ground. So it produces more than 100% of the offering of the sunlight if you combine all the effects to our life. I wish you could do the same. The only way we do carbon sequestration is when our body, you know, goes into the earth when we die, and maybe we can do something before that. I wish. Thank you very much. I'm totally in agreement. Please share your email with me, you and Alex, so we can continue the discussion offline later on.
Yeah, and also I wanted to request, I didn't get this yesterday. We had some interesting guests yesterday, but Alex may be able to put me in touch with the guy who was in San Antonio. I take it he's a friend of yours, or maybe Sharif. I'd like everybody's email addresses, James or Jim or whatever we call you there, Edie.
So either way.
And I guess I'll put my email address, and Kazarwa, I'll put my email in the chat, and then you guys can email me.
Okay.
Please.
Okay, Doctor, like example, definitely we're going to discuss about and share our information. First, we just, because our audience also observing our sessions, if we just focus on today's discussion. Professor Donald, like what do you want to add specifically after the discussions of Professor Joe?
Well, I actually want to go back a little bit because I think it's very important that when, as an educational thing, we give accurate information. And you saw the energy breakdown for Finland, and it was Dr. Churchill's was very, I don't know, a fantastic version of it, which is quite
No,
different than it
they are
actually
burning
is.
everything they can lay their hands on. The trees, the wood, the coal, the peat moss. They burn everything in Finland, and God bless them. They need it because it's very cold.
Well, you may be correct, but people that actually research energy, and I put the thing on, don't agree with you. So this is your own intuition. And they actually, the people that burn peat are the Sami people in the far north of Finland, because it's been their tradition, and the Finns let them do it. Actually, Finn's major source of power is nuclear, and then the second source of power is hydroelectric. And where I lived in Finland, the hydroelectric power was so generous that Microsoft has located many of their European servers there, because power is so cheap in Oulu because of the gigantic river there. And they also have a very, very sophisticated system for the fish, to let the fish come through and up through the dam. So they think about it. I've been actually walked in the dam and seen the system. So, and they told me all about it. But I think that government has to be involved. And I was just looking it up, and in California right now, we're getting as much as 2/3 of our power from renewable. When I lived in Palo Alto, they had been using completely renewable power for at least a decade. And just as I'll remember your name eventually, Kazawara said, if the country like Ghana is preventing it, then it makes it difficult to do the conversions. So the government has to be involved at some level, because in California, there's many incentives for converting to solar. We're actually going to completely ban fossil fuel cars, and they're on the way out. And all over California, we're putting, and I've got to say that Elon Musk is part of this. We've been putting in power stations. And so you go to any parking lot, or most parking lots in a shopping mall, there's rows of power things that you can do. The downtown parking garage in Santa Cruz has whole power stations. And that's, of course, something that needs to happen. But the new batteries from Tesla go at 1 million miles before they wear out. And we're converting, and we're actually doing it successfully, but it's stopped down. And the rest of the country, like Trump has been suing the state of California to try and make us stop weaning ourselves from fossil fuels. I mean, they're actually fighting us, because you get somebody like in America, and I mean, this is an example. It happens everywhere in the world, but we have this. I could not say on the air the words I think of this guy named Ted Cruz, and he fights as hard as he can against any possible reduction in oil, because he's the senator from Texas, and Texas's main money that they make is from oil. So in the United States, we have this weird system where teeny little states like Oklahoma they don't even have the populations. It's a little bit bigger, nowhere close to the population of the Bay Area. And they actually take money from the rest of the country because we subsidize oil. And so if you look at the top 10 industries in Oklahoma, one of them's oil, and the rest of them are all government, military bases, schools, hospitals, things like that. And they have 2 senators, just like California. So they have the ability to basically screw everything up with their the senator from Oklahoma brought a snowball into Congress, and he set it down on the table, and he said, look, there can't possibly be global warming because it's cold outside. I mean, I was just talking to some people saying that voting isn't really enough. We actually have to start taking to the streets about this, and we have to start having protests. He said there were 4,000 protests that made the New Deal. I mean, the New Deal didn't just happen. People were taking to the streets. And I think that in the United States, it's pretty safe to do that. Not totally safe by a long shot. It's safer than probably Ghana. But everywhere in the world, we just have to start demanding this from our governments, because it really kind of has to come top down. There has to be rules, like just like there's driver rules, like driving on the street and things like that. There has to start being top down changes, and it's happening. California is so big of a state that General Motors fought us at first and said, no, we want to keep, and then after a little while they said, oh, hell with it, we're converting to electric, we're joining up with California. So that goes really to what Jim was saying about how there has to be a combination of private and public. If GM's making money on it, they're going to do it, and it's going to happen. And so California kind of forced the issue by not allowing them to sell fossil fuel cars anymore in California. But the upshot of it is that the actual businesses themselves, in order to make money and sell cars, said, okay, fine, we'll just make electric cars. And that's what's happening. And I think that from a policy standpoint, we actually have to depend on our governments, and if they're not doing it, we have to find ways to get them to do it. There's no other way that I can think of.
Thank you. Mr. Alex, what do you want to add specifically at present conditions? What do you think? What the strategy, like any country, specifically developing country, that can take in terms of managing this green technology?
Okay, before I get into that, can you please pull up that image before we go too far regarding some previous conversation, the image that I sent you. So I continued to hear people mention renewable energies and oil technologies. So since we're transitioning to electric cars, it's going to be mandatory in California. We're going to continue to see different options available. So I created this infographic to display all the different ways that we can charge our car versus the fossil fuel industry, where we're just limited to that. So when you have a chance, if you can pull that image up, it's so I spent like 3 or 4 hours working on this image just to clarify. There was an image online that went viral of an electric car being charged by a diesel generator. And I wanted people to understand that fossil fuel or combustion engines are dependent on just the fossil fuels. But when we have electric cars, you can charge it from your home solar system, a large solar system, from geothermal, hydroelectric, eventually in the future from the hydrogen, from coal. So anything that creates electricity, wind energy, tidal energy, anything that creates electricity, we can charge electric cars. And it's just really cool that we could adapt that easy. So this could be different systems and sizes of systems can be implemented around the world to charge your electric car. And I just think it's super cool. So we're not just using fossil fuels and continuing to give more money to the billionaires and the 1% that mostly own the fossil fuels. So I wanted to talk about different ways that I have been able to implement myself in the political system. So when I was around 20 years old, I worked for SynCat Government Access. It was a TV station in Reno, Nevada. I used to film a lot of the community, the city council meetings, the community meetings, and during every meeting, people get to come in, they get to sit at the podium, stand at the podium, and talk about what their concerns are for whatever the city council is trying to pass. Here in Santa Cruz, I've spoke at the podium multiple times. One of the times, I was one of the 13 people that stood at the podium trying to get GMOs, we're not on GMOs, trying to get Roundup banned in all of the Pajaro Valley school district. So out of those 13 people, we all talked to the board, the school board, about the dangers of Roundup. So they unanimously agreed that they were going to ban Roundup in the Pajaro Valley School District. That was 34 schools, because we went up to the podium and spoke. So the more educated our society is, the more activism we do, the more we participate, the more council meetings we go to, it all makes a difference. So everything we do makes a difference. Personally, I've now gone down, well, I'm fortunate that I have the office right here at the county building. It's of Jimmy Panetta. So I constantly, at least like 5 to 7 times, have had half an hour, hour-long conversations with his congressional aide, Emmanuel. So he listens to everything that I say, and every single thing is summarized, and he gives it to Jimmy Panetta. He actually keeps a list of everything that happens in that office. So when I go in there, he makes notes. Alex came by the office. We sat down for an hour. We talked about the fire dangers or renewable energy or this and that. If 10 people went into the office, he would make notes to Jimmy Panetta. 10 people were standing out of this office and they want solar on their houses. So when we give input, that's how it helps. So Jimmy Panetta's some congressional aide of the Congress or whatever. So that's really cool. Drew, he was one of my friends. He was on the Santa Cruz City Council. But these are people in our community. Sometimes they're easy to get a hold of. If you go to events or contact them online, these are the people that are making the difference in my community, on my city council. So you can send them emails. So there's different ways you can directly contact people through the political system, through public speaking, through the city council, through higher levels by finding, your congressional office. So there's different ways to get involved with politics, as well as voting politically. So this is different for every country, but just find ways that this might work in your country. I think that education is so important, and knowing about what's important with our shift towards renewable energies and technologies, because the more we know about this, those politicians and the people making these big decisions, they might be our friends, our family, they might be my best friend's friend or dad. So the more we all know about these things, it starts flooding over into politics. I did want to mention with Kazara, he came out to me and he said, I want to start doing these projects. What could I do? So I posted in my Facebook, please support him. Please help him. Please help him with his goal. And then he got support from 3 or 4 of my friends. They were donating to him. They helped him with his GoFundMe. He raised some money, and then he started installing these solar systems. And it's crazy where he's installing them. It's not like these are villages with everybody without shoes. You should see some of the pictures on his page. It's like hay roofs where he's getting these solar panels. So even though they might not have electricity there, it is helping vote with their money and supporting more solar and systems coming into that area. So it's really cool what he's doing. Maybe he'll post a link to his GoFundMe. It's Uganda. Uganda.
Okay.
Kampala. Yeah, it's just you should see the pictures where it's for sure developing countries. So he has the ability to access regions we don't. So when we support activists that are doing things in super remote regions like Ghana, Uganda, Zimbabwe, I support a lot of people in Kenya. They are doing activism that we can't access, or I can't access. So I try to support them the best that I can. I wanted to mention that here in Santa Cruz County, we're in the process of trying to ban natural gas. And at my house right now, unfortunately, I don't like it, but we use natural gas for the water heater, for the stove. Some dryers use natural gas. So they're trying to eliminate natural gas, the city council here in Santa Cruz County. So it's examples like that when we transition away from fossil fuels, all of those three or four things, the water heater, the stove, the dryer, then they're going to be electric. So that's going to increase our electrical needs, as well as we start producing more electrical cars. Those are going to increase our electrical needs. So the demand is going to be more for electricity. So we're going to have to expand on renewables. I did want to mention the main concern that I have with nuclear energy is that it takes, and Joe could go over any of this, it takes 30 to 50 years to decommission a nuclear power plant. We have all this radio waste that we don't have the money to deal with. I think Russia has the technology to neutralize it, but we're not investing the money that we should. And we have nuclear radiation leaks in different places. But my main concern with why we need to start transitioning towards solar and renewable is because a large percentage of the nuclear power plants or the nuclear reactors around the world are built at ocean level. And as we continue to see the ocean level rise, we're going to continue to see more issues regarding that. If we can, if all of us remember the nuclear meltdown at Fukushima Daiichi, that happened because not only was the storm surge, it destroyed the generator, so it couldn't do the cooling. So if we continue to see rise in ocean sea levels and cyclonic activity bringing more storm surge in, it's just a huge risk. So I do think that we need to transition to renewable energies and start decommissioning our nuclear power plants around the world before it's too late, before another big disaster.
In addition to that, I must add that we have not been able to solve the problem of storage of nuclear waste.
Yeah, we just can't.
And that becomes the most impossible probability of a disaster because the damn stuff, has a half-life.
It's going to go everywhere.
It has a half-life of 7,000 years. And, when you talk about these things, and I put on the comments the perfect mix of the energy that Finland is using. They're using a quarter oil, another quarter wood and coal and mass, and the other quarter nuclear. So how is that ever going to be, positive for the world? I have no idea. But check out in the comments the link to actually the reality of what Finland is using. I know it's been touted as an example, but the only clean people who live in England are the Sami Indians, because they use the same method of energy as they had before, and they use less than 0.5% of what the rest of Finland is using for their own personal needs, because they're nomadic people. And you take people who are nomads, like the people who live in the Sahara Desert. I spent time with a Bedouin in the Negev, and they are using less than 0.2% of what the average American is using. So this incredible inequality of usage of energy is what dictates our policies. And I'm sorry to say, but I agree with Alex, up to the point into which nuclear is the one solution that has to be banned if we wanted to ban something, because the Fukushimas, the Chernobyls, the accidents that happen, in the wind scales in England, they've been covered up. It is impossible for us to manage nuclear, and the only reason why we have a nuclear power industry is because it helps us to produce nuclear weapons. In my state, in Western State, we have the largest nuclear reservation in the world called Hanford. And Hanford is an ongoing leakage of nuclear residue and waste in our Columbia River, in our water, in the air, in the soil, and it is not going to be ever handled because it's so massive. This is where we produced the first atomic weapons that we dropped, in Japan during the Second World War, and we still have an active reactor within that complex, which is very poorly managed. And every year we spend billions of dollars to clean it up, but there is no cleanup on site for the next 7,000 years. That much I know. And that is why I say nuclear is a military industry that, in order to be married to the civilian sector so you can withstand the terrible after effects of it, they made it into something that we all share in the power grid. And the true revolution to get out of this would be to have distributed, democratically separated, private production of energy with solar, with wind, and whatever else is accessible in our own yard. And I've seen the people, doing it more and more. And that's why I say, go off the grid, even if it is illegal. Don't get a permit from anybody to do it. Just do it, and then, apologize later. But do it a guerrilla fashion in your own home, and just be completely off the grid. So you create these microgrid communities. You can be connected to your neighbor, but do not be connected to PG&E, because you see that the cause of the massive forest fires are the transmission lines of PG&E in California.
Right.
People die in those great forest fires because PG&E is so inept to even transferring and transporting the energy, because it was too expensive, in their opinion, to bury the lines underground, although that would have been the wise thing to do. Are they doing it now? They are not doing it. They just declared bankruptcy so they don't have to pay the claims from Paradise and everybody else. So I don't think that even if the government owns this company, which eventually it will have to, it will be to any positive result. Microgrids, separation from the grid, and energy independence is the way to go, not just for America, but for every African country, for every Asian country, and for the individuals we're within. And if many people do it, then there would be no regulation and there would be no legal objection because the governments cannot go against their own people, no matter how much subsidies they get into their coffers as politicians, like our friend mentioned, Senator Cruz in Texas, who only gets elected because he gets money from the oil companies. But that is the case with a majority of the members of the Democratic and the Republican Party. They get contributions from the oil companies, and that's why they support subsidies on behalf of the oil and fossil fuel industry, even though it is totally unfashionable, it is against science, and it is even immoral to keep supporting an industry that has been, polluting the planet for the last 100 years or so. So, in conclusion, I would say that the way that we present this, and I think Joe agrees with this, and I want to salute him also, is that is the solution, both scientifically, both democratically, as well as for the individual scale. Let us make an effort to set up our own flag. And the flag in this case would be a cheap, inexpensive, and strong solar panel on the roof of your dwelling, no matter what kind of dwelling you have. You can live in a tent, as many people go and they live in tents and they have a solar panel. You can live in a sailboat. You can live in a van. A solar panel is the one that allows you. So let us learn from the nomadic experience and do in our own homesteading a couple of solar panels, and you can use truck batteries or boat batteries that are very massive, so you don't have to spend too much money on buying a Tesla battery or anything else, and that way you can be off the grid. However, you have perhaps to rely on propane or natural gas for some of your cooking or even wood, but that goes without saying that is still a better option than having to burn oil or nuclear fusion, in order to get, this energy or do any such thing. So my power is that you all circling around the same theme. So I think we have achieved a certain level of consensus that we are all focused on becoming grid independent. And I wish, to say that on this day of Hanukkah, and I brought Hanukkah up in the beginning, is the reason that the people used candles, and even to today is part of the Judaic law to not burn the lights in your home, but instead of use, candlelight, is exactly that. To be independent of anybody's wish to turn on or turn off the lights for you. In some
Thank you.
ways, this
Thank
is a
you.
small and yet very
Dr.
important
Churchill,
step.
thank you.
Let us
We need
become independent of the
yes.
energy resource. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Churchill. I think Professor Joe and Professor Donald want to add something. Professor Joe.
Yeah, it looked like Kazarwa wanted to talk. We haven't heard much from him. Kazarwa, did you wave your hand a minute ago? Kazarwa?
Okay. Kazarwa, do you want to say something? You want to add something?
Yes, yes. I want to say something. I want to say thanks for giving me a platform to talk about things that are challenging us in the world, and let us work together to promote good environment and clean environment for everyone. Because they say that when we join together, we can make it, and we can make a very big thing. I'm glad. Let us all focus on solar energy as we keep our environment clean for everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Professor Joe, thank you.
I was just going to make a little bit more cosmic relief in connection with what Dr. Churchill was just saying. Nuclear power, solar is nuclear power. It's what I call wireless fusion.
Yes, but at a safe distance, 5,000 million miles away.
A safe distance of 93 million miles away.
Yeah.
And of course, that nuclear fusion is ultimately powered by the gravity that squeezes together the sun. The other, there was one other thought. Oh, yeah. On the nuclear thing, though, I do know some people who are really bright and well-informed and good with numbers and everything, and I haven't geared up to duke it out with them yet. But nuclear power with fission, with uranium and plutonium, are definitely passe and bad. But thorium, a lot of people tout the promise of thorium. And the reason we did not go in that direction is because there wasn't any military use for it. Whereas with the uranium and the plutonium, there is the military use. So the claim is, well, we could make nuclear power safely and abundantly with thorium. However, I think there are some untoward side effects of that also, but I haven't looked into it enough. These other people say they have, and I really need to, as I say, duke it out with them and do the numbers. But stay tuned on any possibility of nuclear using thorium. Of course, it is centralized, although they do talk now about small modular reactors, SMRs, like a little nuclear power plant in everybody's backyard. Yeah, right. Anyway.
Thank you, Professor Donald. And Alex, what do you want to add?
I'd like to listen to what Alex has to say. So,
okay, Mr. Alex.
Okay, so I haven't told anyone about this, but I guess I should probably just start telling people as often as I can to help with our shift towards renewable energies and set a good example to the fossil fuel industry. You know those big oil things that pump oil from the ground? You guys all know what I'm talking about, right? That you see all over the LA area. So I know they look all intimidating and, they're like destroying the earth. They are all black and crazy and oil and stuff. I just want everyone to know you could actually walk all the way up to it and turn it off, and it just completely shuts down. And from what I read and researched, it's really expensive for them to turn it back on. So if millions of people did that around the world, even 100 activists went throughout the LA area and Texas area, or 10 activists every single night, couple weeks, a month or whatever, I think it would set a good example to the fossil fuel industry. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
At the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles, and I will come and support you. So we both go to jail together.
There's a little switch.
No problem.
You just turn the little switch. It says off, and it's just like this huge thing just goes. It's pretty cool.
That's right.
So,
of course, I'll support you. We go to jail together, but you got to come to Seattle to support me too.
Simultaneously, the rogue solar panel systems. So
I must say goodbye, Alex. Please email me.
Okay.
Thank you every month.
Yes,
thank you, Donald. Thank you,
Dr.
George.
Chatin.
Thank you, Kazarva, and thank you, Sharif. I'll be seeing you soon. God bless you all and happy Hanukkah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I love Seattle. I love Seattle.
Thank you. I'll see you up there. You are all invited for Christmas and New Year, out to my humble abode, and we'll have a good time while doing, some home.
Even Kazara? Kazara might come in.
We'll put together, for you to come along, Thank you, Kazara. Bye-bye, guys. Thank you, Sharif, for having me. Okay. Thank you, Donald. I'm sorry for discussing Greenland. I promise it'll never happen again. Ha, ha, ha. And Joe, Mr. Jordan, please send me an email. I love to connect, with your wonderful Methuselah personality. Alex, by no means, please call me. And Kazarma, if you don't come to me this Christmas, I'll come to Africa and find you. We'll do some illegal activities over there, too. Ha, 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 ha. God bless. And Sharif, we have things to do, many projects. God bless you, fellows. All the best. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
God bless you too, everyone.
Cool.
Okay, bye-bye.
Can I continue?
Yes.
Happy.
Okay. So this follows along with what Kazara was doing and with what Dr. Churchill just mentioned. So there's a lot of how do you say this? And what whatever that guy's name is. We call him E. Maybe it's James. So it's scalable. Solar is scalable. There's a lot of different ways to do solar. I've taken a course in solar technology. There's large systems, small systems. You have so there's systems that you can have on houses, which are like medium size. Then there's the big solar fields that you see, throughout California. Then there's the small personal solar systems that you can purchase. And that's similar to what Kazara is doing. There's ones that you can put on your van, your RV, your boat, your car, a lot of different options. I mean, you see those little solar packs. And so every time we buy anything that's solar, it's a way to vote with our money. The more solar we buy, it's basically giving the solar companies more money so they can do more advertisement. They can get into more countries. They can come out with better products by directing their money and those resources towards research and studying. So solar is becoming more efficient than it was 5 years ago and 10 years ago. It's becoming cheaper to produce. Unfortunately, we are starting to see shortages and issues because we're on a planet and there's finite resources. I think this silicone that Joe will probably go into it. I think there's going to be shortages in the future with solar and manufacturing of solar. Fortunately, we are finding new technologies, new ways to recycle solar panels. This hasn't been mentioned yet, but if there's let's say 10 solar panels on a roof, I think like every 10 years, like one of them, they'll all degrade and like be less efficient. So if there's 10 on a roof and like 10 years goes by, they'll start like losing efficiency. Maybe it's like 20 years, it'll be like 10% more less efficient. So then you add one more solar panel to get the same solar output. So that's one of the disadvantages with solar, that they do degrade. But there's okay, so I'm going to go back into what Kazara is doing and Churchill mentioned. I purchased this really cool solar system. So in the past, I purchased some from Goal Zero and Anchor, like small little systems that produce 15 watts. But then I finally bought this one from Rock Pals. It's just like it sounds, Rock Pals. You can Google search this, find it online. So right now they're $150 and you get a 60-watt panel that's material on one side and it unfolds. When it is folded up, it has a little handle. It's like a little flat briefcase. It's just so powerful. It has USB outputs to charge different USB things. 60 watts, it's a lot of watts for personal consumption. When it's folded up, it's about this big. Now, for about $200, you can purchase the 100-watt solar panel. Now, both of those are great options if you like going backpacking, camping, hiking. If you want to start contributing towards, renewable energies, put it on your car. If you're out in nature or your RV, you can mount them to stuff. But Rock Pals has this same unit that I bought, so with solar, you have the solar panels, then you have the control module, which regulates how much power goes into the batteries. That thing stops the power because you don't want the batteries to overcharge. So it's solar panels, control module, batteries, which is storage, and then the last thing is the DC to AC converter that converts the DC energy of the batteries to AC, which is the plug in the wall, which most of everything that we use runs off of. A lot of stuff does run off DC, but that's different. So it's basically 4 components. With home systems, you have the solar panels, the control module, and the batteries, and then the inverter. Sometimes you don't have the battery, so you skip some of those steps. And when you do home solar installation, batteries, I think, is a large percentage of the cost and maybe most of the cost for storage. So sometimes you don't need batteries with home solar systems. You just go straight from solar panels to the grid or solar panels to your electrical consumption in your house. Now, that Rock Pals system that I bought is not only solar panels, but it came with this cool box. It's like this big. It has a handle on it. It's orange. It was $180. That thing has the whole 3 things that I mentioned built inside of it. So that you get these 2 things. It's solar panels and then this Rock Pals box. They call it a generator. Even though it's not generating electricity, you can find it that way. So that box has the control module, the batteries and the DC to AC converter built into it. I love it. Like, it powers my drone batteries when I'm out. It powers my laptop. Occasionally my shaver, everything. It has plugs. And the cool thing is also it has the electrical outlet for like all of the countries. Like, the different plugs for different countries. It's like universally standard, and it has all these different units. It has USB plugs on it. It might have a flashlight built into it. And it works really well, and it holds a lot of power in that box. So that's another way that I could become energy independent by that system if and when, because I live in the mountains back, so there's trees. They sometimes shut down the power with PG&E, and that also allows me to have to be able to charge my laptop and charge my cell phones and all my stuff. They're really cool systems. So I'd recommend other people checking on this. If you can't put solar on your house, if you can't afford it, if it's not even your house, you could still buy this really cool system. So it'd be about $350, $400 total for these things. So that's what I have. That's the input for now.
Professor Donald, yes. We directly want to go for the concluding remarks. So, like Professor Donald's, you just yes.
Okay. I do want to say one thing that hasn't come up yet, which is we do already have energy infrastructure in the United States. It's not necessarily true in other countries. It's true in the cities, but sometimes it doesn't make it into rural areas. But a lot of people argue that wind doesn't blow all the time, and that the sun isn't up all the time, and so that they're never really going to be useful sources. Ted Cruz argues that. But when you actually think about it, instead of right now, the energy use of petroleum is still going up, or coal and things like that. But to the degree that we can start substituting for the other, that's incredibly valuable in and of itself. So maybe you have solar and you don't have enough storage, so you actually have to take some power from the grid. Well, the time that peak power happens is usually during the day, so that power can be supplemented and greatly reduced. What would happen if we have a 20% reduction?
I have to say bye and sign out right now. So I want to say bye to everyone.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Happy holiday. Happy Christmas.
Yeah. So anyway, I wanted to make that point, and it's always wonderful listening to these people, these experts with their great experience. Thank you, everybody, and thank you all for listening to us. And I'll see you soon.
Yes. Thank you. I want to go for the concluding remarks. Before that, tomorrow we have sessions. If you have available time, you can join tomorrow's sessions. We want to discuss one on the clean waters and sanitations. So I'm sure that your contribution will be very important for World Talent Economy Forum, as well as we are working on sustainable development goals. So any of your new idea and things definitely helpful for us. And I want to start with Professor Joe, then Alex, and finally Professor Donald for concluding remarks. Professor Joe.
Hey, well, let's see. One sort of down in the details thing that just came to me based on something that Donald just said. One of my favorite potential applications of solar energy, which isn't really realized yet, but believe it or not, you can do air conditioning using, not just using the electricity from the sun, but actual direct solar powered air conditioning using something called absorption chilling. It's a strange kind of chemical process, absorption chilling. And the thing that's beautiful about it is it requires high temperatures. But of course, when you need air conditioning the most, when you have the greatest demand, like in Arizona in the middle of the day, middle of the afternoon, that's when you also most have the high heat from the sun. So the demand and the supply fluctuate in phase. And I think there are several companies and efforts that are closing in on an economic version of this. So kind of watch this space, as they say, for absorption chilling for solar powered air conditioning, because there are vast parts of the world, especially in the very humid tropics, where I mean, there you can run, well, you can't run swamp coolers. It's too damp. But so something like this could really help improve standards of living all over the place. And it may well be feasible with solar. Anyway, that's kind of a stay tuned sort of thing. And so, as I say, that's kind of a detail. If we want more grand conclusions here, I guess I would just have to say, the future is potentially bright if the human race is bright. And it's kind of like I said at the beginning of my TED talk, if there is going to be a human race that's at all thriving, centuries from now, a key signature of our civilization will be that it's powered by the sun. So it's kind of up to us. The sun's doing its part. We got to do our part now. So, yeah, there you go.
Yes, thank you, Professor Joe. Hopefully, we will get more of your contributions. And Mr. Alex, what the concluding remarks for today's session?
So again, education is just so important. Having these discussions, and thank you, Sharif, for this important topic. There's so many categories and subcategories when it comes to our transition towards global sustainability, to transitioning towards a caring society. So this was another important topic. I'm happy that we all had our individual input. So as we continue to burn fossil fuels, and it's just, these are the solutions. And if there's any viewers, or for all of us, like, these are huge solutions. So solar is a solution, wind's a solution. There's different countries that would have a variety of different renewable energies. But again, just talking about these conversations, becoming an activist, learning what you can, promoting it, just doing everything that you can, because we do have to transition away from the fossil fuel industry and our use of fossil fuels. And these are the solutions. So this is what we have to implement in our communities, throughout our government and our society. So that's my concluding remark. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alex. Professor Donalds, what is your concluding remarks? And if you want
I want to mention something to Joe, that Facebook has been using a cooling system where it doesn't require any energy. They use the heat of their servers to basically cool the place down, and it's actually quite cold. People told me it's the blast of air they get from their coolers. So these kinds of things are being implemented. There's a lot of things that we just really don't even know about, that unless I think a good place to read is Nature has it has a free newsletter that I get every day about some of the cool things that are going on, and also some of the very scary things that are going on about what's happening in Antarctica and other places. I have to really just echo what Alex said, is that the more we know about what's going on, and as I said, reading Nature is a good place to learn a lot. The more we know about what's going on, the more we'll be able to have that information going out. Like, as you know, I'm into social networks, and what Alex said about, you talk to somebody and you don't know that person is going to talk, who that person is going to talk to, and it spreads that way. So I think that this forum is really, really wonderful, and I thank you for having me on it, and I learned a lot from everybody, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again.
Thank you, everyone. Tomorrow we have sessions, same times, about the clean waters and sanitation. This is very important, specifically for the developing nations. Even for Malaysia, clean water also important. So Singapore, clean water also important. So,
could the four of us stay on for a few seconds after you run your final little the promo thing with the graphic and the music?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, because I have a couple questions I want to ask everybody. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So, Mr. Alex, do you want to add anything? Yeah.
No, I'm okay, but I look forward to the next session and providing my knowledge and expertise the best that I can.
Okay. Thank you. And Professor Joe? Yeah.
That's just the sun rules. Keep an eye on the sky. Sky power to the people.
Thank you.
Solar.
Thank you, Professor Donald. Thank you for your valuable times. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes. Bye-bye. Take care.
Hi.
It worked.
So yesterday.